Ladies and gentlemen, have you thought that heaven is measuring your reality? Have you considered the possibilities that you are not living just within your own gaze, but within the gaze of those cosmic beings who examine the fabric of man's motivations and intent? In view of the great realities of life, and that these things are true, I commend unto you those beautiful images and the beautiful image, which is the solitary reality of the innate divine intelligence within you. Within you lies a gift, and that gift is so supreme, so beautiful, so all-encompassing, that I want to remind you today of this gift in a more than ordinary manner, that you may esteem it, elevate it, and be elevated by it into that place of cosmic prominence where at last the face of God may be seen by you as the pure in heart that shall see God. The realities of life are fragile because they are easily broken as a thin thread drawn out in the matrices of life. It is unnecessary then that this fragility of life should cause individuals to be shattered. Let them instead learn to esteem the divine calling and to recognize its reality. For then I believe that all men will feel in a different manner toward the beckoning of heaven that constantly comes unto them, saying, "Come up higher." For individuals have a calling, and that calling, when it is sustained, is a beautiful manifestation of hope, that the things of this world that are not of God may pass away, that those things which mankind ought to cast aside be cast aside, and that those things that ought to be esteemed as true reality be garnered and gathered in the business of living in that wonderful divine economy of the use of life in a correct manner. How many people today wander the streets of life listlessly and aimlessly? They do not remember the thrust of reality that has been imposed upon them by their cosmic identity. They do not realize their native graces and gifts. They have long forgotten what it means to behold a pillar of light that connects the soul with the divine strength of God, that like a lion with wings carries forth its activity of roaring unto the hearts of men. It is as a giant seashell pressed to the ear, and the heart of the universe is heard. When all understand that the roar of life and the summoning of the cosmic sun precede mankind's total dedication, they will recognize that first reality must appear to their gaze, and then that reality in all of its solemn beauty will create a new consciousness in them, which shall sunder their ties with the old consciousness, and they shall find that it shall be no more, and there shall be no sense of loss to the soul. For behold, that which now in the latter days appears of divine reality as a manifestation of the Holy Spirit is seen as a tie of cosmic justice moaning at the bar of life, perhaps, when first man set sail, but sooner or later becoming the source of divine contentment and universal peace. When mankind understand that there is no sacrifice in the world, but only the thread of universal contact, when they understand that the human rationalizations in which they have engaged often betray their virtue and their real sense, they will perceive that openness of heart and openness of vision thrusts before men's gaze the realities of God one by one, as though the veils of life were shattered by the transcendent realities of God. Can you understand then, ladies and gentlemen, the burdens upon the heart of the world? Can you understand the burdens upon the Divine Mother's consciousness as she seeks to unify, to glorify, to intensify, to vivify, and to beautify the souls of men? Well, won't you think about it just for a moment? For if you do, I want to assure you that it will bring a tremor of gladness to the heart of the Universal Mother. And with that magnificent tremor of gladness will come a return current of life that will radiate up and down your spinal column, because it is a blessing from on high, signifying the reality of the appearance of Christ and the Christ consciousness in this age, not to one but to many. For the hearts of many today are quaking for fear of those things which are yet coming upon the earth, and how needlessly. Ladies and gentlemen, if truly men and women lift up and exalt their own tender realities, how the green shoots will spring forth, and how the abundant presentation of newness of life and newness of hope will manifest. When it does, it will bring gladness to the soul and delight to the eye of all. But mankind, through sundry visions of mankind's inhumanity to man, through individuals' failures to apprehend that perfection of God, wars have been created in a ceaseless array upon the historical stream. When I speak to you then this day of keeping the flame of God, it is to confer upon you a multitude of graces, in the fond hope that through the multiplication of those graces, you yourselves individually per se will find then room in your heart for those adorning jewels of perfection that are the summoning of more and more of divine grace. The power of God and the power of his manifestation is indeed the boon of every part of life. Yet how frequently individuals do not realize the divine and tender reality that stands shimmering just behind the appearance world. Won't you then today set before your gaze, before the gaze of the soul's eye, that beautiful hope that is the hope of the universal God for the soul to appear in the full regalia of ascended master consciousness? Won't you permit your consciousness to be washed with that pure stream of God reality that is? Won't you admit yourselves that you have from time to time failed to recognize who and what you are, and allowed and permitted yourself to fall in the esteem of the very heavenly beings, simply because you have not recognized that these heavenly beings exist, and have considered that perhaps it is indeed nothing more than a figment in the mind and imagination of some individual? Well, ladies and gentlemen, is your life then your imagination? Is it your life that beats your heart? I say that it is. And if it is your life that beats your heart, and this life is no imagination, then don't you understand that divine imaging of perfection will produce in your world, in your thoughts, in your feelings, in your imagination, that universal stimuli, which is of God, and will produce fruit after its own kind. There is no need for humanity to be uncomfortable. There is no need for individuals to feel themselves surrounded by pressures which they feel they cannot break, which seem as bands of iron or of steel, which seem to enclose the mind and the heart, and not allow that beautiful flexibility of the spirit to exercise itself upon the trampolines of their mind. I want you to understand then that universal grace is within the heart of freedom, And when that freedom is enshrined within your heart and mind, it is a germinating activity of regeneration which will produce in you that magnificent reality that is solely the reality of God. It is not necessary that individuals should then feel bereft of the consciousness of God, for he desires to give that consciousness unto all. But he does not give this consciousness that mankind may feel those competitive manifestations which you have called and termed jealousy. For jealousy is a sad travesty upon the quality of life's pulsations. For life pulsates with the beat of universal freedom, and mankind take upon themselves the solitude of bondage, and yet at the same time lament to one another concerning this bondage imposed upon all and always self-imposed. For somewhere along the trek of life, individuals should understand that they have accepted a certain weakness in their mind and feeling, which has allowed and permitted them to become excruciatingly dark, simply because they do not cleave to the light. When I say this, I do not say it as though it is a reality forever. I say it only as a temporal measure which mankind have themselves instituted, namely, the manifestation of darkness in that place where light ought to dwell. So consider your heart as an abode of light. Consider your mind as a place of light. Consider also your nerves and the various nerve plexus as manifestations of transferal, that individuals may perceive that their nervous energy may be translated into peace and light and strength and wholeness and the fervor of the cosmic fire. When individuals begin to feel this, there is a certain activity of holy vibrancy that occurs within the force field of their mind. And lo and behold, that which mankind of old termed the magical manifestation of reality takes place, and the alchemy of transformation is given to every man, that he may behold at last the great sublime reality which he is, and no longer adhere to those mental concepts that are so self-limiting in manifestation and in consciousness. Will you understand the beauty of divine freedom that can be your own, that is your own, that is the lot of every man, once he realizes that the passion that he feels for freedom is in itself the seed of freedom? And when I say to you today, scatter the seeds of freedom in your consciousness, I say it because it can be done, not because it cannot be done. The question then is, are you willing to accept those graces which heaven offers to you today, and to recognize that you have something to do with the manifestation and exercise of divine dominion in your world, that the entire world be purged of those negative manifestations of darkness, doubt, fear, and confusion that have occupied the mind of the world and flooded the world with those concepts of the great dragon Tiamat, rather than the holy consciousness of the unity of God and the unity of purpose. The unity of purpose in heaven's name is given to all. And when all understand that the transference of that energy can come into the domain of selfhood just as easily as you push a switch, then certainly you ought to make a switch and understand that you must transfer your consciousness from the sense of limitation and fear to one of love and confidence. Through the exuding of that confidence into the realm of space around about you, you will be hallowing space, so that space will no longer be desecrated by human thoughts and the nonsense of those thoughts. Will you understand that? For it is a severe and sublime moment at the same time, one whereby mankind can understand that they must literally pull themselves up by their own bootstraps, that they must literally seize the opportunity of enshrining freedom upon its throne, in order that the world be blessed with those manifestations of God freedom which are the hope of the world. The light of the world, the light of the world, the light of the world is Christ. But unless Christ be enshrined, unless Christ be accepted, unless Christ be understood in heaven's name, you cannot actually bring about that measure of perfection which God himself intends to be the lot of all. Why then will you tarry in those same sense doldrums which you have manifested for so long, without necessarily evoking that cosmic fruit which you have so long longed for? Will you understand then the great need for mankind to enshrine the forever sense of God in their temporal consciousness, their sense of time? The forever sense of God means that you have behind the screen of your mind an abiding sense of that security which can never be taken from you. It means that death cannot manifest for you do not see those episodes and chapters of your existence as though they were the index of death, but rather the manifestation of life. And when you step from the mortal body into the immortal realm, it is a stepping forth into victory and control, because here and herein, in the frame of matter and the appearance world, you have learned to master energy and life. When you learn the supreme sacrifice of the givingness of the soul unto its God flame, the sweet surrender of being will encompass you with quite a bit of suddenness, and behold, the Lord will suddenly return to his temple. How beautiful then that the God that has been denied access and control to the consciousness for so long can at last find himself in that God control of the individual realm, whereby he can institute and preserve those manifestations of the living flame in that mind, in that consciousness, as a breathing essence of wholeness and holiness. Beautiful are the feet of those that preach the gospel of peace. But let me remind you that all the world's a stage, and each man in his time plays many parts. When then you make your exits or entrances, will you understand the grandiose feeling of being in harmony with the living God? Will you understand what it means to cast aside those weights and shreds of mortal darkness and substitute in its place the effulgent circle of cosmic love and light as a flame of protective fire, and the elements of your own tube of light and the elements of the crystal cord descending upon your consciousness with the full impingement and impact of grace? Ladies and gentlemen, you do not need any longer to loll, as it were, upon the beds of life and feel that energy and life is passing you by. Instead, you may learn the mastery of that energy here and now, and as keepers of the flame, find that you can take that magnificent dominion over your life that will give you a newfound freedom that you have not known before. I recall how long ago when first my own mentor, my spiritual teacher, and the internal realm of light within me spoke out of the living flame and said, "Won't you be free?" And I first contemplated the idea, "Won't you be free?" And I said, "Why not?" And I took a forward step in spiritual consciousness. And then there came a moment that was the cessation of all sensation. It was as though I stood upon a pinnacle of non-support in the whole universe and was separated from all life. And from that position, I suddenly reached out with almost a sense of panic, and I cried out, "O God, where art thou?" And out of the flame within my own heart, he said, "Lo, I am within thee." And as I thought of this simple idea, this simple but beautiful concept, almost like a child, I suddenly perceived that through the eye of the needle came the thread of light, and my camel passed through. Won't you understand that in my love for those of you who have known me so long, I also wish to extend my hand of friendship and devotion to those who have first heard me speak to them today. It is not a matter of the last being first or the first last. It is not a matter of human competition. It is a matter of human decision that brings in the activity of the divine lever. The human decision is that lever, and it moves as Archimedes' lever of old, the heart of cosmos, to function in your own blessed domain, where God also is. He stands then as complete now as he will ever be, and the fullness of his power is able to evoke those high degrees of confidence within you that will sustain a universal momentum not only through the days of this life, but in the foreverness of God. There are some of you here that will ascend at the close of this embodiment or shortly thereafter. There are some of you that will ascend in your next embodiment. There are some of you that must defer a while. And so I speak to those of you, most especially, who must defer a while, by saying unto you that you can hasten the day of your ultimate freedom in the light by understanding the awesome reality of just being. Being is a solemn responsibility. It is one in which sometimes the deity indeed chastens the soul that it may bear greater fruit. Be not dismayed because all life does not always obey you, but obey life, and it will cast upon the shores of your soul all that your soul needs and requires for each moment. You will find yourselves gathering the shells upon the sands of life and discerning how to produce that real sense of discernment that will separate the chaff from the wheat. And there is much chaff in the world. For men have misqualified substance so grossly, and the hearts of the divine beings are often in a state of lamentation momentarily as they perceive the injustices that move in the busy streets of life. When we speak to you today, then, it is to call you to the keeping of the flame and the sustaining of a momentum of faith in the world that will glorify the beautiful spirit of grace that has made you in such shining hope. And when that shining hope matures, I tell you now that through grace and courtesy and through universal culture and through the voice of kindness and the voice of love, the world shall ascend as one. For we shall all join you when the sublime moment comes that the whole world has ascended its last man, and we shall ascend together. We shall descend together to ascend together. And behold, all of you shall understand why the statement was made, the last shall be first, and the first shall be last. Let then your heart not be troubled any longer, neither let your being become afraid. For the waters of life that cover the heart of each individual are given to you that you may drink deeply out of this spiritual drop. For this does not quench the flame. Yea, rather, it is the water of fire that kindles the flame and preserves intact all universal motivation, all elements of universal hope, all that mankind through the centuries have yearned for. And when we behold the heart of the world today, when we see the prayers that are rising as sweet incense from the viharas, the mosques, the temples, from those at all parts of the world, it is as a renewal of our own consciousness of the beautiful Savior of all creation, the beautiful God consciousness, the eternal sense of values that does not demean human life, but esteems it, for it is in manifestation and in principle the principle of the Most High God. You are matter, as you are spirit, and spirit will be absorbed once again into matter, and matter will be absorbed once again into spirit. And these twain as east and west shall meet, and in the merge of matter and spirit, the new body, the body celestial, shall be revealed as that over which each man may take dominion. In the memory of the hope of God, for the golden age I remain devoted to your ever-enfolding light, divine principle,